Iminat 31 na Legislature Guam is called to a special session. I'd like to request for the adoption of the agenda by our majority leader.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that we adopt this agenda titled Imina 31 Legislature Guam 2012 5th Special Session, date October 24, 2012.
On that motion, hearing no objection, so ordered. I would like to ask if Senator Frank Blas Jr., you can lead us in the prayer. Senator Tom Ada, if you can lead us in the recitation of Inafresi. Senator Tina Munoz Barnes for Panogi Chamorro, and Senator Sam Mabini for the national anthem.
Thank you. If we all can please rise and put ourselves in the presence of God. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, as we are gathered here today to deliberate and to decide on a very important piece of legislation, we ask you, dear Lord, to continue to guide us with your grace, your wisdom, your knowledge, and look over us as we make this decision, so that this decision actually comes out for the betterment of all the people of our island. We ask this in your great good name, and we ask this through your Lord and through your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
like to ask the clerk to take roll call.
Senator Tom Ada. Senator Tony Ada. Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Duenas. Senator Gutherts. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tahiran. Speaker Wampet.
Geiga.
Senator Yamashita. Madam Speaker, I wish to report there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes the majority lead for their call for the approval of the legislative journal.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On item 7, I move that we approve the legislative journal dated 9/2011 to 9/23/11, fourth special session, subject to correction.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, I move that any communications and petitions be appended to today's special session journal.
No objections, so ordered.
And there are 2 messages specific to this call for the 5th special session. I move that these messages from Imagalayan Guahan be appended to today's special session journal.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Also, reports of standing committees pertaining to this special session, I move that it be appended to today's special session journal.
No objections, so ordered.
And there are no reports of select committees, and there are no introduction and first reading of bills to be read. And under motions, Madam Speaker, there are no motions at this time, as well as legislative concurrence and consent calendar, as we're required to only entertain the special call, the call to special session. So I now move that we proceed to the second reading file on the matter of S. Bill 52-31 COR.
Thank you very much, Senator. We are in second reading, and for substitute bill number 52-31 COR, I recognize the committee chair, Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today, before I proceed, I'd like to place substituted Bill 52 on the third reading and be allowed to briefly speak on it.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today we will vote on a very important piece of legislation, Bill 52-31, also known as the Women's Reproductive Health Information Act of 2012. Madam Speaker, for the record, let me be able to give a brief, brief background on how this came about. In January 2011, January 25th, I believe, 2011, the Committee on Rules introduced Bill 52-31 at the request of Imagalayan Guahan, the Governor of Guam. It was referred to my committee, where the committee had a public hearing on it. We reported it out. It was substituted, the Committee on Rules, and I requested it be referred back to my committee. And so we did some further work on it, and so we, 2 days ago, reported out another substituted final version, which we have before us today. The purpose of Bill 52-31 is to ensure that all women who are contemplating an abortion receive complete and accurate information material to ultimately making their decision whether to undergo an abortion. The bill in no way, Madam Speaker, in no way, shape, or form, unfortunately prohibits an abortion to take place. This legislation ensures that a pregnant mother be given adequate time to read and reflect upon the information the physician or the physician's authorized representative provides her. Bill 52 is vital because all women deserve to be apprised of the facts relating to this profound and irrevocable decision while the opportunity to decide still exists. Indeed, it was the U.S. Supreme Court, led by a pro-choice majority, which recognized that informed consent laws such as Bill 52 further a legitimate public interest by attempting to ensure that a woman apprehend the full consequences of her decision and thereby, and I quote, reduce the risk that a woman may elect an abortion only to discover later with devastating psychological consequences that her decision was not fully informed, end quote. And that was from the Planned Parenthood versus Casey U.S. Supreme Court ruling in 1992. Toward that end, Bill 52 requires abortion providers to apprise women regarding the probable gestational age and anatomical characteristics of the unborn child at the time the abortion is to be performed, the availability of public assistance for prenatal care, childbirth, and neonatal care, the availability of public medical insurance and family support for qualifying families, and the liability of fathers to assist in support of the child, and the legal process for determining paternity. The version of Bill 52, which is now before the legislature, is in fact a substitute version of the original bill. This substituted version, Madam Speaker, which I reported out of the committee, is nearly identical to the original bill. The committee listened to the issues raised by several members of this body, which resulted in revisions and additions being made to the original bill. It was the collaborative effort the committee undertook that resulted in 9 of our colleagues voting to recommend to this body its passage. One of the contentious issues raised was the requirement to produce a video to show a woman seeking an abortion. I'm happy to report that that section was deleted in its entirety. Another issue raised was that this legislation is unconstitutional. Madam Speaker, the Attorney General's office 2 years ago issued an opinion signed by Deputy AG Patrick Mason on the same legislation before us that the language used in Bill 54-30, which is identical to Bill 52-31, would survive a constitutional challenge. And as I stated earlier, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld that requiring a physician to provide information 24 hours prior to an abortion is constitutional. Testimony that is included in the committee report contains information that the Department of Public Health and Social Services may use as a framework in developing the printed material and checklist. This should facilitate the quick development of the requirements. But most importantly, Madam Speaker, this bill does not take effect until the department has done its due diligence and has compiled and produced the printed materials and checklists that is required on this piece of legislation. And so, Madam Speaker, I am requesting that my colleagues vote in favor of this legislation that is before us. I know that there was some testimony provided very recently by Dr. Thomas Shea, and so I'm ready to provide an amendment deleting one of the sections. And I spoke to him before session here. One of the sections that state the malpractice action. And I have here a copy of that. I don't know if, can we get a copy? This is page 11. Page 11 of the bill, of the substituted version.
Can you please state a point of information?
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. I just want to make sure that we're speaking of the same bill. One is Bill 52-31 CR substituted, one showing the deletions and the underlines, and one just basic. So I just want to know which one. Is it the one with the substituted bill with showing the amendments? Is that the one we're working on, or is the one before that?
Senator, would you respond?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Senator Barnes is correct. We are working off the copy we have before us is Bill 52 as substituted by the Committee on Health and Human Services, Economic Development, Senior Citizens, and Election Reform, and further substituted by the Committee on Rules and referred back to committee by the Committee of the Whole, and further substituted by the Committee on Health and Human Services. And what is attached after this is a digest showing what those changes are. But the copy before the digest is the actual bill that was reported out.
Thank you very much, Senator. On page 11.
Yes, and copies are being made right now, Madam Speaker. Is on page 11, line 8, is to remove the sentence, provide a basis for civil malpractice action and provide standing to any woman upon whom an abortion was performed or attempted, allegedly in violation of this act, to bring such an action. And then we're replacing it with this following. In the case of an intentional violation of the act, constitute prima facie evidence of a failure to obtain informed consent. And then it should, that's what we are replacing the sentence with. And everything else from line 12 of page 11 will continue.
Okay, we're going to take a brief recess and until we get a copy of the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Legislature is back in session, and everyone should have a copy of the amendment. Okay, Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized to have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, now that my colleagues have a copy of it, just like to amend it a little bit further on line 8 to strike out the words "in the case of," and just have the sentence start off with an intentional violation of this act, of the act.
So, okay, so it's in the case of to also delete. And you start out with on line 8, an intentional violation.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so what it is line 8 to line, oh, I'm so sorry, you're right, that is, the lines are different, Senator Rodriguez. So it really is line 8 to line 10, any intentional, no, wait, that's different. Yes, Senator, you're right. I mean, this, you must be working your work. Can another recess? The legislature is back in session. Senator Rodriguez, you still have the floor on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we're going to revert back to the original amendment on line 8. In the case of an intentional violation of the Act, constitute prima facie evidence of a failure to obtain informed consent. And we're just going to change the, on the in on line 8 to a lowercase I, just so that when we deleted the first sentence, just to have it be able to flow properly, that's where we're kind of getting stuck at. But with the advice of council, they recommend that this be done this way.
Okay, did everyone follow the amendment?
No.
Okay, then what it is that lines on page 11, lines 8 to 12 will be deleted, and then you add the words in the case, and it's a lower I, in the case of an intentional violation of the Act constitute prima facie evidence of a failure to obtain consent form, then continue on line 12 when requested. So we're adding a new sentence before when requested. Is it clear to everybody now? On the amendment? No objections? So ordered. Senator, you still have the floor? Okay. So on the motion to send then substitute Bill 52-31 COR to the third reading file, unless anyone would like to speak. Speaker Pangilinan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, Sidusmasi, for giving me an opportunity. Madam Speaker, I contemplated whether or not to even participate in the discussion and just quietly cast my vote on this matter. And it's very hard for me to do that, as many of you know, that I always try to express so that the public understands what I base my decision on and the thinking process that goes through my mind. And I got many advice on this matter, says they're not interested in that. The general public is not interested in why you decide one way or the other. They just want to know what you decided and cast your vote, duck your head, go out there, hide, and hope you survive the election. And Madam Speaker, I don't think that I could go home and do that. I don't think that I could run home and hide. I don't think that I want to do that because I have never done that in the past. I wasn't like somebody, Madam Speaker, that I know that while they were running for an election, when this body was going to vote on a bill that would have provided $100 million in tax refunds and $100 million to pay our COLA recipients, that there were members of the community that it wasn't popular back then to even talk about borrowing money to pay for tax refunds, Madam Speaker. Believe it or not, today it's the most popular thing. How do we borrow money to pay tax refunds? And we all fall all over ourselves to try and find how we can borrow money. Never mind how we can pay it back. All we're interested in is how we can borrow money. And back then, Madam Speaker, when the discussion was, should we borrow money for the landfill, and that's all? Or should we also include borrowing money for the refunds and the COLA? Members of this body were telling me, because I was proposing, that we can't leave our people behind. That we owe our people these refunds, we owe the COLA recipients this moral promise that we've made. People weren't even interested in the legal promise anymore. It was the moral duty that we had to fulfill our obligations to our manamko. And of course, that was the discussion. And members of this body were saying, no, we can't because we're under consent decree. And if you borrow money for the COLA and the refunds, we won't be able to sell the bonds for the landfill. And the landfill's the priority. Never mind the people, the landfill, the landfill, the landfill. And we had people in this body Madam Speaker, who would not face their responsibility and their duty to come into this body and cast a vote on that. Why? Because they were running for election. Their position was, I can't afford to piss people off because I'm running for election. And they were running for governor, Madam Speaker. So when it was them, Madam Speaker, they would not come in here and fulfill their duty. Today, they're calling us to come in and fulfill our duty. And we're here to fulfill our duty. But it's so ironic that when it was them, they turned and would not come in here and face their responsibility. But now, because they're not running for election, they think we should address this matter. And so that's why I've decided I'm going to address the matter, Madam Speaker. You know, Madam Speaker, it's very, very difficult to try and take this discussion and take it outside of ourselves, so to speak, Madam Speaker. To take it outside of what defines us as a person, number one, what defines us as a member of a community of faith, number two, and our responsibility to ourselves as a person, to our community as a faith, but then we add the additional responsibility that we have in this body to make the decision not solely based on those criteria, but the other criteria that we have professed, we have promised, we have sworn to consider when we make our decisions in this body. And that is the community of the entire island of Guam, with all its diversities, with all its differences in beliefs, in faiths, in thoughts, in ideas, in opinions, and that it is our responsibility as public officials in this realm here today on this floor to base our decisions based on that as well. Because I'm not saying that we separate ourselves from those two other criteria, because we can't. It's part of what defines us. But even at that, Madam Speaker, we have that responsibility. If this was a question in church, very simple. The answer that I would give as a person of that community and that faith, it's very simple. My response, no. Of course not. Of course we don't want to see abortions. If it was just myself, in my own home, or in my outdoor garage with my family, it was a very simple question as well for me. No, I don't. I don't want it for my family. I don't want it for my community of faith. But that's not where it ends, unfortunately, Madam Speaker. And we all have to face ourselves and try to carry that responsibility for this more diverse community that we have sworn to consider their rights in making the decisions that will affect all of us. Not just my community of faith, not just my family, not just myself as an individual. And do I feel that I am duty-bound to inject myself into those families and those communities of faith other than mine? That I should impose my own will on them? It's very, very hard, Madam Speaker, to know when you should do that, if you should do that. Is it right to do that? And we have these things that guide us when we make the decisions based upon our greater community, Madam Speaker. And those are the laws that govern this land and how they guide us in terms of giving us guidance, direction, fiat of when we can inject ourselves in those situations, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, as I look at this bill, can what this bill seeks to accomplish be accomplished without this law? Yes. It can. Should it be? Yes, it should. Should it be a matter of dicta coming out of this body to inject ourselves in those communities and those families? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so, Madam Speaker. But it doesn't mean I don't support this. I just don't support it in this fashion, in this element, when I have to look at the greater community that I have sworn to consider and to live in and to guide and to exercise authority and power over the laws that will govern their lives. And should this law, this personal, for my own, this personal acceptance that this is not correct, I mean that what we're trying to do should be happening in families everywhere? Yes. But should it be happening where this is not the decision of those families or the individual themselves? Should I force them? I don't believe so, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is not the first time we've argued this issue and presented ourselves with decisions as difficult as this coming out of this legislative floor, Madam Speaker. And I tell the story of the first time that I was faced with this. And who better to turn to than the one most affected by it, the woman, Madam Speaker. And I spent many, many nights with my mother, Madam Speaker, and thank God she was still alive back then. Many nights going back and forth of what I have a right, now I had that right, to tell her what to do in the situations like this. Whether or not I had that right. I wasn't her son anymore. I wasn't her Catholic son raised in all the Catholic schools, going to the Catholic universities anymore. I was a government official who had the power to tell her what to do and how to do it. And I tell you, her response was, I know what to do. Let me do it. Let me take responsibility for what I need to do. Between myself, my situation, my God, let me take that responsibility. Don't impose that responsibility on me just because you have a power and other people want you to impose that responsibility on me. Think about me and my right. Think about who's going to suffer everything. If I want to go to the church to talk this over, I will. I'm going to make sure I talk it over with the doctor. I'm going to make sure I may even talk about it with you, son. But don't tell me I have to, and don't tell me I must, and don't tell me I shall. Leave that responsibility to me. I carry that burden because I was born a woman, and I want you to understand that. I know it's hard, and I know you think you're doing the right thing. And I will seek guidance wherever I can and however I feel I need. And yes, I truly appreciate everything else that goes on in all of the many, many people with a good heart to want to prevent these things. And I support them. But in the end, it's something that is happening to me and me alone. And Madam Speaker, I don't have her anymore. I don't have her anymore to tell me. I only have her memory. I only have her desire and her prayers to continue to guide me. I only have her knowing that I am not evil, that I wish no malice on anyone, and that I do the best I can. And if somebody wants to demonize me for doing that, let them. Because I know she never will. She loves me and trusts me. And I will forever try and live up to that love and trust. It really is unfortunate, Madam Speaker. I could turn to anger about the politics that the governor has taken on this thing. Because I could see him out there smiling. Because he thinks he's cornered everyone. But I will continue to do what I think is right. To struggle and live with the decisions I make. And to pray that if they are wrong, that on that judgment day, I will be judged by no one else but God. And I will accept his judgment. Thank you, and Situs Masi, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Mr. Speaker. Senator Palacios on the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, after reading Bill 52 as amended, the bottom line here, Madam Speaker, is that actually it only has two features here. And that is the informed consent provision, which in my opinion is elaborately and adequately discussed and presented. And the other feature, Madam Speaker, that we don't have nowadays is the 24-hour wait. So considering Bill 52 in that context, I would say, Madam Speaker, that it is a viable bill. The informed consent is adequately defined in Bill 52. And it says here that to be adequately informed of the pros and cons of abortion and the 24-hour wait period. Madam Speaker, these two features do not absolutely prevent a woman to terminate pregnancy prematurely. It does not. It does not completely cancel a woman's right of choice, even though we passed this law. The comment that current medical practice of informing patients of a medical procedure and that Bill 52 is not necessary, I say, Madam Speaker, that Bill 52 will institutionalize what is now an acceptable practice anyway. And I know, I mean, I've been a patient, I've seen doctors, and they'll tell and they'll go through this checklist, and then that means you are informed. And that's what Bill 52 merely proposes to do. Woman, please be informed of the choices, the alternatives, that perhaps maybe you can keep pregnancy to the delivery date, because there are helps out there. There are people that wanted to adopt. All of these things are incorporated in the Bill 52. Madam Speaker, I venture to say that if Bill 52 was law, let's say 5 years ago, imagine how many children would not have been aborted, and I venture to say that at least 50%. And those children that could have been saved by Bill 52 if it had been law 5 years ago, would be 5 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old, 2 years old, 1 year old, maybe we still have infants. I know for a fact Bill 52 will save life. I know that. The sacrifice of Bill 52, and I would say this, is that, yes, it might infringe to a certain extent a woman's right to choose. Yes, indeed. But I say that that minor infringement will in no way compare to the harm that it would occur if Bill 52 is not passed. So you measure and you balance which is the greater of the evil. And I will say that the greater of the evil is the defeat of Bill 52. That is my position. And I asked my colleague, Madam Speaker, I read Bill 52, the original form. I read this substitute bill. The pro-life have made some concession, such as, for example, the removal of the illustrations and the video, and they're satisfied with that. Now, I feel that I am concerned, of course, of the infringement on a woman's right. I always believe in people's right to choose. But in this case, Madam Speaker, that right is not absolutely erased. It just says, sit down, we will give you the choices, we will educate you on this one, wait 24 hours, and then from there on, it's between you and the doctor and God, and then you leave it at that. Bill 52 does not prevent, does not cancel out absolutely the right of a woman to choose in the end, if she so chooses to do so. And that's why I'm supporting Bill 52, because of that compromise, or that provision, that a woman still has a right in the end. And so I ask my colleagues to support Bill 52, which is the so-called informed consent bill, and let us save lives. According to the statistics and the reports, I guess every day or every other day, at least 3 abortions a week, 52 weeks with 150 lives. I mean, we could have saved maybe more than 50 lives there. I know that. I don't need the statistics to know that if a person is more informed, that choices can be better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, recognize Senator Dueñas. Sergeant at Arms. You need to control people.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to rise and speak in support of Bill 52-31. Madam Speaker, much like the retiring speaker from Barrigada, I am also one known not to be quiet on issues. Madam Speaker, I have also been known, I guess, to be one that tends to support policies enacted by or requested by this executive branch. I'll take that. But the author in his opening explained very eloquently why we're here. The bill number is 52. It was introduced over 15 months ago. And I sat, Madam Speaker, and raised an objection in a meeting in preparation for a session, joining the author in being very upset at the substitution and gutting of the bill's original intent. That's why we're here now. I believe that, and I believe that's the truth. Madam Speaker, moving to the merits of the bill, I join the immediate retiring speaker in saying this bill provides an opportunity to help women who are making a very difficult situation, which I agree with the retiring speaker. I respect wholeheartedly. I also find in the materials that would be required to be distributed men to be held accountable as well. The understanding of the explanation to the possibility when a young woman or a woman of any age really facing this issue with financial constraints and not understanding the uncertainty of the future, that they would realize that men have an obligation, a responsibility, a duty to take care of the life that they would bring into this world. Madam Speaker, over 30 states have this very legislation. They have robust legal systems with officers of the court who on a daily basis work hard to protect the rights of people. But Madam Speaker, they have seen fit to pass legislation which this legislation mirrors, because I believe, even as has been challenged in the highest courts of the land, they believe this is simply an opportunity to protect women from potential violence and opportunities such as I'll explain here that have been presented to me by government representatives. Madam Speaker, CPS recently confirmed that there is a waiting list of more than 10 adoptive parents. But they have not had an available child at public health for over 5 years. People who cannot have their own children, who would take and nurture and raise these children as their own. Should that happen? Should that option be available? The 24-hour waiting period is not just time for women to review the information, but it's time also to detect whether or not a woman is being forced to make this decision. We shouldn't hide, Madam Speaker, from the things in our community that are wrong. We've tried. We now put people in jail as a holding period because of the violence that's been exacted against women in our community because of the family violence. We don't allow them to withdraw cases. And statistics will show you that a lot of that violence sometimes is people who don't want to take responsibility for their actions and would perpetrate that violence against a woman. And it's wrong. Madam Speaker, on this very island, we require a 24-hour waiting period to buy a firearm. Why is that? Because people who sometimes are enraged and have uncontrollable emotions will make very poor decisions. There is no reason why we couldn't extend the same to allow for an opportunity for someone who is going through an emotional issue to perhaps make a different decision. Madam Speaker, an abortion is not like any other medical procedure because it is the only procedure that intentionally ends the life of another human being. We don't even really have to bring in the religious implications, our duty to our church, as has been described in this issue. It's a scientific fact that there's only 2 interventions that can happen upon conception. And that is man termination or nature, even if we leave God out of it. The body's own decision to terminate that pregnancy. That is a fact of science. Madam Speaker, I've heard also even comments that would challenge this bill about the fact that there would be lawsuits. Not weeks ago, we entertained legislation and passed in special session. We called a special session for that bill and entertained it, knowing that the AG expressed reservations, knowing that there was almost sure lawsuits to come if that legislation were to be sustained. Madam Speaker, in closing, we have enacted bills in this legislature that have been designed to protect children, designed to protect families, designed to protect our community as a whole. This legislation is no different, and we know why we're here. I will take the opportunity to say, I understand the difference between church and state. And when I was contacted, not just this year, but ever since I sought public office, by religious entities and institutions to say, what is your position? I always said, please do not make this a political issue, because it's not political for me. It is an issue of my faith. Madam Speaker, while there is certainly and maintains, and I respect, the separation of church and state, I must say that the currency in which we deal still says on the back of it, in God we trust. And I trust that we will make the decision, the right decision, in support of Bill 52, as 10 members have already signed on to do so. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Dueñas. On the motion, Senator Yamashita, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Most certainly all of us, I guess I should only speak for myself, we certainly know why we are here, why we ran. I think most of us are running again. Why we're doing this. It certainly isn't a walk in the park, and it certainly isn't a party every day. It certainly is serious business. I did this because I felt I can help craft policy, energize policy, amend policy that would help ensure that all families, all people on our island are respected and given fair opportunity. I've gone on record many times. And that includes women. That includes women. When Bill 52 is first introduced, and it is true, towards the beginning of this term, I remember the public hearing, I remember the committee, I remember committee on rules, I remember all of that. And I remember session, and I remember the fine chair taking it back to committee. And so I was really a little thrown off when 2 days ago I got notice that we were called into session this morning. And I wondered where that came from. It was a rush. And certainly I don't think anyone here will argue that it's not a rushed issue to talk about telling women that there is one more thing you have to do as you make this decision. Between that notice and today, we have all been bombarded by email. Sometimes an author of an email will answer another person, sometimes a group would answer, sometimes attorneys answer. I guess the best part of it all is that there was actually dialogue going on, but for me, it was on the internet. And so when I first got notice of this, I went to our website because I wanted to know that at least there would be an adjudication process to look at all the steps that would determine what a woman would have to look at, would have to read, would have to listen to before making her decision. Well, that particular bill was not on the website, and I was assured that there was an adjudication process inserted. Well, in the last 48 hours, I too have been talking with doctors, with attorneys, with women. And I'm not sure why we believe that women have to be subjected to laws to be able to make their decisions. I'm not sure why we think that we are not already seeking this information when we make decisions about us. I'm not sure why we have to pass these laws to say, you really don't know enough. You really need to think about it. I'm not sure why we would think that the medical profession isn't already doing this, Madam Speaker. In talking to the medical profession that I have in the last 2 days, they most certainly take their profession, their jobs, their duties, their ethics, their life on this island very seriously. And I don't think anyone is arguing any of the merits that I'm raising, but I am asking, what is the rush? Why were we called into session to meet this morning at 10? And then because of our Simon Sanchez and, well, all of our high schools, their Millennium Project, we pushed it to 1. I just wonder if we could not have had one more invitation to all of the medical doctors, all the lawyers who are raising these concerns, to have one more conversation in the name of the female gender. I'm not being feminist. I'm just being respectful. Only people who have found themselves in unexpected pregnancy know what that's like. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one God. And it's the families who have grown those children who are the ones who are supposed to be around that woman to decide what. We talk a lot about government and how far we reach into our rooms, to our living rooms, to our bedrooms. And while I can already tell this will pass, and I already have been cautioned, I have been warned, in some regards I've been threatened, I ran for office to represent every single family and every single person, and that is what I'm doing. So this may be the end, but I'm doing what I said I would do, and it is my responsibility and my duty. So I just ask, what is the rush? Could there not have been one more conversation inviting all to talk about this? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Munya Barnes.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I was sitting here listening to some of my colleagues speak, the gentleman in the room, I don't know if you saw my facial expression or my agitation in the chair, and debating to myself whether I should speak or not. And my office right now is probably saying, Senator, what are you doing? It's probably going to be political suicide for you. But I'm going to tell you a story, Madam Speaker, because when the first speaker spoke, I truly understood where he was coming from. And when the other two speakers spoke, I felt in my heart, Jesus Christ, what are we doing here? Madam Speaker, several years ago, a couple of years ago, I had a young student from Academy, a very young student from Academy, who introduced legislation to this effect. And I asked her in my heart, is this really what you want to do? Knowing that there's laws and provisions out there that adhere to the process that you want to do. And she said, you know, Senator, I really want to do that. Do you have anything wrong against it? I said, no, honey. You are the senator for the day. You go to a very good school. And I'm very proud because I, too, am a product of the Catholic School Academy. And I said, it's funny that you're asking that same question on informed choice. Because, Madam Speaker, somebody in this room spoke about political processes, and this is not politically motivated, and I beg to differ. If I vote for this Bill 52, it's because I believe in my heart that I was raised the right way, the way my mother and my family raised me to be. And 32 years ago, when this same issue was brought to my attention because it was happening to me, I chose life. I chose life. And today, the political wills will have you threatening me to vote the way I want to vote and forcing it down my throat. Then you have those who say, Senator, please, we have this issue. It's happening everywhere in the States, everywhere you go. Before you do anything, look at what laws exist today. Look at what we as professional doctors do today. I have a very good friend who's been in the medical profession for, I think, right after high school. She went straight into medical school. And today, I value what she says to me. And she says, do you think that I'm not going to give my patient the best medical advice I can possibly do? I said, I believe you. I trust what you do. But when somebody threatens me to say, you know what, I assumed you had an abortion. I assumed because of what you said and how you said it. Well, I just want to reiterate for the record, Madam Speaker, that 32 years ago I chose life and I'm proud of it. But I don't appreciate any man here telling me that I have to vote for it because I choose from my heart and I choose for what's good with my people, and if the people don't want me, they can vote me out every 2 years. Every 2 years. When I vote for this bill this afternoon, it is because I believe in life, and I believe that when that young girl in Academy said, this is the bill I want to introduce, I gave her that opportunity. I said, is this the bill that you think in your heart that's right? She said, yes, Senator. I said, are you going to look at all the research that's going to happen? And she said, Senator, I'll work with it with my colleagues on the floor. That was one day. But I said, as noble and as bold as you are, honey, please take the time to look at all the issues before you make that final vote. And you know, Madam Speaker, a lot of us will forget. But when that debate was going on with the teenagers, it was met with some controversy and some contention. But of course, based on what we believe in, based on how we were raised, the bill won. And when it was happening here today, I mean, this term, the 31st Guam Legislature, we had folks from both sides of the aisle. And we did make some changes to fit what is logistically set in law by our people in the nation, whether we believe in Uncle Sam or not. And then we were persecuted for that. And then we were told, you had an abortion. You did this, you believe in that. You didn't even give me the opportunity to speak to you. So you know, Madam Speaker, when people come up to me and tell me how I want to vote, I tell them that I speak from the heart. I tell them that I speak from experience. And I tell them that there will always be pros and cons to every issue. But what I need to do from my heart is to make sure that it is in the best interest of all the people and not just some of the people. So before any man can say that this is not politically motivated, I will tell them they're wrong. I had a right to choose what I wanted to do, and I chose life. Make no mistake, I am proud of my daughter who works in this community, who has 3 children of her own. But was I torn back then? I was torn. I had a college degree, a scholarship that was given to me, that was presented to me. I had a modeling career. And they said, do you want to give that up? And you know, in my heart, I thought I was going to get murdered by my mom and dad. When my mother told my father I was pregnant, the best blessing I could ever receive was, what can we do, Ann, but love them even more? Because Dawn and Tina are still our daughters. And to this very day, I thank God for raising us with the values of respect, for raising us with the values of giving, loving, and sharing, and to be good to people. I live on 4 core values, Madam Speaker, and it's 1, anything and everything is possible with God. 2, respect others the way you want to be respected. 3, education is the key to full success. And if God has blessed you with all those fine ingredients, please give back to your community what you've been blessed with. My twin sister shared that with me, Madam Speaker. And more than 32 years ago, we both were in the same situation. And we have no regrets. If I vote on this bill today, it's because I believe in life. But let me tell you, there's definitely something wrong with the political wills in this community. There is so much persecution going on, and that needs to stop. And I'm really, really sorry from my heart that I had to stand up here with the emotion and the passion, because I know how it feels to have to choose between life and death. And I tell you today, I have no regrets. And I will continue as a Christian, one who believes in the Catholic faith, that anytime any woman comes through my doors and contemplates doing that, I will advocate for life. And I would ask, in the event you cannot support, give the child to me. Madam Speaker, my family has been raised like that. We have adopted children from all parts, from the islands, from within Guam. My brothers and sisters have siblings that are not even of our own blood. But that's because Munya means loving, caring, and sharing. And I'm never going to forget that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Senator Barnes. On the motion, recognize Senator Tomata.
Madam Speaker, the issue before us, I find, is a very difficult one. And quite frankly, I thought that I had everything that I needed to know about the issue. And then when the announcement was made that we were going to have session to finally take action on this bill, then the medical community came out and started giving their perspective on the bill itself. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to make myself as informed as possible so that I can make a decision. Then this morning I received an email from a young woman that I know and respect. And here was her email. Not to add more pressure, but hopefully my 3 daughters are never caught in a situation that will require a decision like this. I pray that my girls will make right choices in life. However, should my family be faced with this issue, it really should be between my girls, the doctors, and the family. If your vote determines whether people keep you in or kick you out, that is sad. And she goes on and ends it with saying, I love you. I respect this young lady's very much because 13 years ago she was in this situation. And she had to make a choice between keeping the child or giving birth. On her own, she made the decision to keep the child and give birth. And I'm very proud of that young woman today. She married the father of the child. They now have 3 daughters. And I just adore this family because they are as strong as ever. I would like to think that this young woman is not so unique, that she's the only one that can make decisions like this. I want to believe in mankind that there are many women out there who have the values to be able to choose to keep a child and give birth and give it the love and raise that child. And I think that when this young woman made this decision, she did it without government interfering in that decision-making process. She did it without being bombarded with all this information. She did it because she knew she would have the support of her family. And she made the right decision. And so her statement that should my family be faced with this issue, it should be between my girls, the doctors, and the family. Nobody else. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, I recognize Senator Monasilva Tyron.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I was reluctant to talk about this also because it is a very emotional issue for a lot of people, a lot of women. And I myself know people who have been faced with the same choice. I'm a very strong follower of Christ, and I'll let you know from the get-go that I am pro-life and I support saving babies and making sure that they're allowed to have a chance at life. I've always been pro-life, and I will always be pro-life. But going back to being a Christian and a follower of Christ, I know that it's not right to judge others and to cast stones. I'll read you a few verses from the Bible. In Matthew it says, "You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." goes on to say, "Judge not, that you be not judged, for the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And I talk about this because it's really disheartening, because the same folks who say they preach the Word of God are spreading these nasty emails. The same people putting out columns, calling people intrinsically evil, baby killers. Should we be judging others, or should we be loving them and forgiving them and encouraging them also to follow Christ? Do we lead people to Christ by tearing them apart, defaming them throughout the community, ruining their lives? If truly we believe in life, shouldn't we be building up our brothers and sisters and encouraging them to be better people? Should we lead by love? I'm pro-life, and I'm pro-respect. And so I ask that if you truly say that you are a follower of Christ, forgive your brothers and sisters and encourage them. Don't chastise them and call them sinners, because all of us are sinners in our own way. Now I'm going to go to some of the things that were said. The question was raised. While we are elected officials, we represent the entire community. Yes, we do represent the entire community, and there's a small fraction of people whose voice isn't being heard. For me, I always try to find how to represent the underdog, how to represent those people who don't feel like they have a voice, whether they vote for us or not, whether they're even of age, and in this case, for me, personally, whether they're even born. But I tell you what, I went over this bill over and over again. I went through YouTube. I was watching all kinds of videos. One that I remember that I watched in high school, it was called, gosh, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was about the process in which an abortion takes place. I think it's called Silent Witness. And I wondered, do we even teach our children this? Is this something that we discuss in our schools? Do we talk about sex education? Do people know one way or another? But Madam Speaker, this bill to me isn't about pro-choice. It's not about pro-life. It's about pro-patient. It gives the patient an opportunity to know every single thing that's going to take place in her body. It gives her an opportunity. It is an invasive procedure from what I've seen on YouTube. Anyone can go and take a look. They've got the most gruesome, and then they have the ones that are drawn in cartoons, and any way you want to look at it, you'll find it on YouTube. But I have to wonder, I've had my appendix taken out, and I knew step by step what was taking place in my body. I had a tooth extraction up at Ordot Dental, and I knew step by step what was going on. Why is it that we know more about what's taking place in those routine procedures than an abortion? I believe that patients need to know what the implications are, step by step, in every procedure that they undergo. And if they don't want to know, well, they don't have to listen. When you get a prescription, you get a full sheet of every single thing, the contraindications, the pros and cons. Every bit of information on that prescription is given to you. Whether you like it or not, the pharmacy is required by the FDA to give you those step-by-step guidelines. I don't hear anybody griping about that. But you know, Madam Speaker, this bill, one thing that I wanted to address, and perhaps we could look at it another time, or if we want to introduce an amendment to it, what we don't address in this measure is the psychological impact that having an abortion will have on the patient. Because whether you know it or not, or whether you want to believe it or not, there is a life growing inside when you are impregnated. And human nature will tell you somewhere in time in your life that that baby died. And so how do you deal with that? Does a doctor let you know that there are psychological implications, that you'll suffer depression? Perhaps not, and it's not true for every single patient, but it is a possibility. So why not tell the patient the potential harm that having an abortion will have? While you're at it, go ahead and tell them some of the positives, if you can find any. Give them all the information. Let them be informed. There's nothing wrong with being informed. This isn't, again, I'm going to tell you, this is not about being pro-life or pro-choice. This is being about pro-patient and having all the information before you undergo the procedure. Somebody talked about it on Travis Kaufman's show on K57 yesterday. You get a tattoo, and you got to wait 24 hours before you actually go through with it. And that's a tattoo. You're marked for life when you have a tattoo, but I guess for me, you would be marked for life if you undergo an abortion. You know, my mom often tells me about how she had to go through daily progesterone shots, and because I was at risk when she was pregnant with me, every single day of her last trimester, she went to the doctor, and step by step, she knew what was going on in her body to make sure that her pregnancy was carried through full term. When I had my baby, Dr. Shea was my doctor, and I knew every single thing that he did to me from the moment I went to see him, every ultrasound, every single thing I knew. I don't remember asking for the information. There were certain things that I did ask, but he gave it to me. He told me what he was doing and what I could expect. Why is it that when we choose to terminate a pregnancy, no information is given out? I thank you, Madam Speaker. I do support this bill, and I do ask my colleagues to do the same.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, recognize Senator Sam Mabini. Yeah. You do. Okay. Senator Mabini.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This morning, several of us were at Simon Sanchez High School speaking with a group of students and also to many other students at the various high schools through the power of the internet. And one of the things that kept coming up that I brought up, and so did other colleagues of mine, was the importance of empowerment and education. And this bill, I believe, does that, providing information, empowering the woman to make an educated decision. It doesn't take her right away, correct? The decision is to help protect her particular health circumstances. And as the previous speaker from Barrigado mentioned, it's about pro-patient. However, after listening to all the passionate and a lot of them very practical and logical arguments, the one thing that keeps jumping out at me, and that hasn't been brought up, and by the way, and I wanted to share that this issue continues not only on Guam but also throughout the United States. I've been carrying this around. This is the August 2012 Capital Ideas State Governments periodical that we receive. All of us should be usually receive. And one of the central articles on this had everything to do about women's health care, abortion, and so forth. And so I've been reading through this over and over again. And what was interesting to me is that even in the discussion of abortion, the one thing that wasn't brought up throughout all of this, and what I'm bringing up, is something that I'd like to bring forth to the author of the bill. I heard an interesting quote or reference about children. I am pro-life. I'm also pro-patient. The quote was, "There's no accidental children. Unfortunately, there's accidental parenting. Wasn't planned." So I'd like us to go to page 8 of the bill, line 19, or excuse me, let's start on line 16, to address this question about this issue about accidental parenting. It says here, starting on 16, that the printed material shall include a list of the entities, a description of the services they offer, telephone numbers of the entities, and shall inform the woman about available medical assistance benefits for prenatal care, childbirth, and neonatal care. But what I don't see in here, and if it is true that this bill is about empowering women and informing women, is about the issue of birth control. So I'm going to pose to the author to add as an amendment there, because this is about empowering and educating women about this option. And it'd be a simple addition on line 19, instead of saying childbirth and neonatal care and options for birth control. Because this can't be seen without the other. The reality is, it happens. The reality is that our kids, and by the way, birth control is abstinence too. But we can't ignore it. I'm an educator. Our teachers face it every day. We face it. We parents face it every day if you have a daughter. Heck, if you have a son. So I'm asking the author the suggestion of putting as an amendment to add that one addition. I think that's a fair question to ask and proposal.
Senator, in this case, it really is an amendment.
Okay. Then I will go ahead and proffer an amendment to add that in that line. And by the way, I am supporting this bill. I would just like to see that amendment, because if it is about empowering women, we want to also avoid future possibilities of their unwanted pregnancies.
On the amendment on page 8, line 19, will be then to add, delete the word "and" neonatal care, and instead, after that, add the word "and" options for birth control. Senator Frank Blas Jr., you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm looking at the germaneness of the language that's being proffered in the amendment as opposed to what is going to be provided. We're talking about already a female who was already of child. And I would prefer that if that was a discussion, and we can have a lengthy discussion on this later with regards to whether or not we want to have that language. I think that the literature should stick to the care and the procedures that are necessary for the care of the woman who is already with child. And so with that, And with all due respect, and I recognize it as far as the concern and the want to provide the information, I don't understand. I don't think there's the context of providing that kind of information in this information is germane, and so therefore I have to respectfully object to that amendment.
There was an amendment, of course, proffered by Senator Mabini. There is an objection by Senator Frank Blas Jr. On the amendment. Is there anyone who would like to speak on the amendment? So since there is an objection, then I would call for the vote. So all in favor then of the Mabini amendment, raise your hand. The amendment failed. So on the main motion, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I wasn't going to speak until that last amendment failed. But, and I know I may be found out of order, I want to state that I have signed that I will support this bill because I too believe that it's just an informational provision. It's not what anybody else thinks that it is. It's not going to affect whether or not one is pro-life or pro-choice. It's just allowing the women to be informed. But I was actually hoping, Madam Speaker, that rather than the bill that is currently on the floor being considered, we would have had the opportunity to discuss a bill that many of us introduced, co-sponsored, Maisapoti from Malawans and Satba from Magoon. Support women and save the children. This whole issue is multifaceted. A woman that's currently pregnant doesn't mean that she's not going to get pregnant within weeks or a month after she gives birth. And she should be advised of maybe the word was wrong in birth control. Maybe it should have been contraception. But we had to be realistic about this. And our bill on 415 was going to provide for education. There was a section on prevention of unwanted pregnancies, education and counseling programs, a hotline, requirement of domestic violence to be reported. We had a safe haven provision in our bill, 415. And it provided money. I had asked for an appropriation from the Healthy Futures Fund. And I could not believe, Madam Speaker, that that was the biggest bone of contention. It's like throwing a steak out in front of 10 dogs. There was a fight over who was going to get the money. Which current organization is it going to go to? Why are you creating something new? And the reason why I was creating something new is because we obviously are still having a major problem in this community. It hasn't been addressed by all of the combined organizations that we currently have. Because we don't have an educational program, we don't have a prevention program, because it's imperative we have a prevention program. But the objection was, the fight was over the money. I was so disgusted. Because it was a very well-intentioned bill to try to address this issue holistically. That does not mean that I don't support the Bill 52 that's before us on having people informed. I'm very happy and I'm glad that both sides have agreed that that video was going to go out. And that we had a provision in there to make sure that we had a AAA process that would be able to discuss how or what this material was going to sound like. It wasn't going to be something that was going to be attached to the bill and was going to go into law by virtue of attachment to this bill. But we would have a hearing, and hopefully all of the health professionals would attend, using their FAC after their name or their MD or OBGYN, whatever their titles were, to be able to use and inform the process. So the information that's provided is as balanced as possible. That was the only reason why I was going to support this bill, is because I realized we could have the extreme of 52 as it first was introduced, or some that were even, in previous legislatures, that were even more draconian than that. I was happy that we were at least coming to try to find some consensus. I was hoping it was going to be my Bill 415. That doesn't mean that I'm going to give up on it, because I really do believe that at some point we're going to have to deal with this holistically. There has to be prevention. And not everybody was blessed with parents who taught them right from wrong, unfortunately. After 10 years on the bench and handling family court, the one thing that I was convinced of was there should be licensing. As fascist as that may sound. But my hairdresser needs a license, and look at this mess. And unfortunately, people are bringing children into this world with no idea of what their responsibilities are. We've got to address that, and I was hoping that Bill 415 was going to be the vehicle that would be able to get out there and put together with this organization, and I was hoping that it was going to be led by the First Lady. I'm very happy that she's taken up the issue of foster children, because I've been championing that for almost 25 years now. And I know that we've hit a plateau. We can't get past 35 families on this island. Yes. This island that espouses to be pro-life and wanting to find adoptive parents, we can't get more than 35 families on this island to agree to be a foster parent. Even with the power of her office as the First Lady of this island, she's having problems with that. And I know the concerns that are out there. I mean, the provision that's in this one bill where they're talking about, oh, that we should advise the young woman about the obligation of the putative father for support. We'd better stop and think about that, my colleagues. Those of you that have your iPad or your computer here, just look up rape father. In one state, a young girl was raped. And it's in one of these states that has this consent where she's told that he has a responsibility to support. So he was told. And now this poor young girl and this child are going to have to live with the trauma at least once a month of having to see this animal in visitation. He's suing for visitation. I don't regret saying an animal. But we really have to get realistic. We have to recognize that this has to be dealt with holistically. And I'm willing to accept the compromise of 52 as it's currently written, in the hopes that all the rest of you will also stop and assist me in making sure that 415, as we've been trying to rewrite it and trying to address some of the issues that have been people's concerns, will eventually pass before this legislature ends its term at the end of December. Because we have to address this holistically. Because if we don't do the prevention, we'll continue to have the problems. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Mr. Vice Speaker. But the bill on the agenda is Bill 54. And 52, I'm sorry. On the main motion, are there any other speakers? There being none, Senator Rodriguez, would you like to close? Huh? Wait, I'm so sorry. One moment. I saw her hand now. Senator Guthridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, this has been quite a session today, and I've listened carefully to my colleagues, and I admire them for their sincerity and for some of them sharing some of their experiences with us. And I've been looking at this bill for some time, and I had the chance to talk a little bit to the sponsor. It appears that he seems very assured that this bill meets all the legal requirements of the law, and that it would not become an issue after it passes here. And I hope that's, in fact, the case. In terms of information giving, I support information giving. This bill appears to be guided by the goal of providing information and provides a little waiting time for people to think about this procedure, a little more maybe than rushing into it, and that's fine. But I do want to comment on a couple things. One is, you know, all of us here are rooted in this community. And I'm no exception. Like my colleague, I also graduated from the Academy of Our Lady. And we were taught certain values in school. And one of them is to value life, and I don't think anyone in this hall doesn't value life. But what I would like us to think about, ladies and gentlemen, is how we got here today. And I know there are people out there pushing for this bill, and that's their right to do that. we live in a democracy, and they have the right to lobby for bills, and particularly a bill that means a lot to them. And I support them out there lobbying for this bill. But my concern is not with the bill. And I've already signed on as being willing to vote for this bill because it's information giving. I don't like how we were brought here to do this. Because when we vote on this bill, and it looks like it will pass, people are going to wonder, did we do this because we're facing an election on November 6th, or did we do it because we really believe in it? That's the question that people are going to ask us. And I have some concerns about that. I like to be able to vote on legislation without a gun to my head from the governor. And we're not being given that opportunity. The governor knew exactly what he was doing when he brought us into session today. There's a dual agenda here. One, of course, is the bill itself, which he supports. And the second part is the political benefit to a cause that he may be pushing. But I don't sit in this hall for political benefits, Madam Speaker. I sit in this hall based on principle. And I just want the people of Guam to know out there that my vote on this bill is based on principle. The principle of providing information to our people. That is, I'm hoping that public health will ensure that this information is truthful, honest, and informative. And not because the governor called us into session with a gun to our head. I think it's important to say this. And another reason, Madam Speaker, as I said, is because the chairman of this committee feels very strongly about this bill. He believes that it's consistent with what other jurisdictions have done, that have withstood legal challenges, and I'm willing to go along with it because of that. But I dare say, if we had been able to go in session as we had originally planned on November 13th to take up this bill, the end result would be the same. The only difference now is a political side has been injected into this process, and it should not be. This bill should stand on its merits, not based on a political call to arms. In closing, Madam Speaker, values are important to me. I appreciate the education I received in the schools I went to on Guam, including the Academy of Our Lady. I respect my colleagues, and I don't have a problem about giving information to individuals that could be benefited by it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, I recognize Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, now that every single member of this legislature on the floor rose to spoke one way or another on this bill, certainly, Madam Speaker, I want to say that I appreciate all the comments of our colleagues, and the comments, whether it's for the bill or express concerns for the bill, really underscores how difficult this issue has been. It also underscores what has happened over the last year, and I rise particularly to commend a colleague in particular that called the proponents of this bill and asked them, if you really support life, then stop beating up on the living. And I think I'm in a position to rise to say what has happened over the last year, Madam Speaker, has been extremely unfortunate. What has happened over the last several days is also unfortunate, that this bill was made to be about life versus death, about pro-life versus pro-choice. And as you know, our Chief Justice here spoke, and all of us have great respect for him. This bill, up until the time it was amended by the committee and received by the Committee on Rules, may have really been about pro-life and an unintended consequence to put a moratorium on these procedures. And I could not just keep quiet and not point out one aspect of that bill where originally, as introduced by the governor, would have required the Department of Public Health to approve the written publication and as well as approve the checklist. You know, Madam Speaker, for those of us who understand the process and understand the whole concept of unintended consequences, certainly if the Director of Public Health did not move to provide for a written publication or move to provide a checklist that department could receive, then an unintended consequences would have resulted in a moratorium on these procedures. And if my comments are again going to be taken out of context, Madam Speaker, then I'm going to say it anyway. And whether or not that may have been the motivations of the bill, because I certainly don't want to highlight what those motivations may or may have not been, I just want to call attention to what causes us to move forward in this respect. The Committee on Rules received the committee report yesterday, and if you look at the voting sheet, I'm pleased that the Committee on Health has recognized two issues with the bill, and one of them was the video screening, and then the other one was making both the written publication and the checklist subject to the Administrative Adjudication Act, subject to the process by which the public can, through that input, can decide what kind of written publication is going to be developed. We had medical doctors step forward to say that written publication, Madam Speaker, has to be objective. You know, whether you want to recognize it or not, there has to be objectivity and balance in everything that we do. And granted, you have one side that is for this bill, and that any one of us who have made amendments to this bill or alter it in any way, it's now labeled as gutting the bill. And so now that the bill has been presented to us and those two issues are not in the bill, maybe it can cause us to move forward, which we're seeing today. But I want to rise to something that the previous speaker before me just said, is just how much does this administration believe in the separation of powers doctrine, in that we have three co-equal branches of government here on Guam. You know, this morning I had the opportunity and the pleasure to speak with the elementary class from Anderson Air Force Base that came down here to the legislature to see our public hearing room, to see our session hall. And I gave them a presentation, Madam Speaker, on the separation of branches and what the executive branch does and what the legislative branch does and what the judiciary does. But for the life of me, it was ironic for me to tell these elementary students the textbook definition and explanation of what these co-equal branches of governments are. I told them that it's the legislature's responsibility to pass laws, and if the majority is the will of that law, then it's the governor's responsibility then to decide if they're going to if he's going to approve it or veto it or pocket veto. And I explained all those things, and those fourth graders certainly knew what I was talking about. I even talked about the judiciary's responsibility, Madam Speaker, in that they can either interpret that a law is constitutional or unconstitutional, or they can compel the executive branch to implement those laws that the executive branch refuses to implement. I also told these elementary students, Madam Speaker, because they understand and they know what these differences are, and I use an example of the legislature's support for our judiciary by passing a bill that requires that every time the cash is collected by the executive branch, that the governor then by formula has to give the judiciary what's due it based on what is appropriated to it by this legislature. And unfortunately, we had to do that because the executive branch was shortchanging the judiciary, or the judiciary had to threaten a lawsuit in order for the executive branch to give it its money. We also have seen many decisions coming out from the Attorney General that really doesn't show that we're separate but co-equal branches of government. And the fact that we're in a special session, a fifth special session on another matter, which the governor has said, bring my version to the floor. You know, Madam Speaker, I think everyone has a right, and if we get at least seven other members to agree, then that bill, whatever it is, Madam Speaker, it can be amended through that process, and we're seeing the evolution of that process this afternoon. But when I told those students about other examples of how we respect the other branch of government, you know, I'm pleased to report that they had a very good experience here at the legislature, Madam Speaker. They were in awe that the very room that they see on television, whether it's GTA's channel or MCV's channel, they saw our public hearing room, and then they came in here to the session hall, and they were in awe about, you know, how they can see something on TV, and I told them that we would be going into a special session today and that they should be watching if they have the opportunity to. But this is what excites me about our government, is the ability for all of us to cooperate, but to do it in a manner that's respectful when at times it comes contentious and when at times there's disagreement. You know, I want to make the same appeal because we were visited by the other end of the spectrum. This morning I talked about very young children, but the other day we were visited by our manuncle and one of our medical physicians. They were outside holding up their signs, Madam Speaker. They were told to come to the legislature because there was going to be a hearing on the abortion bill, and that's how it was labeled. And so knowing full well, Madam Speaker, that the hearing was not on that issue, but rather an informational hearing that was called by Senator Gutherz, you know, I went outside and I said, come inside from the hot sun. We'll get you some chairs. You can hold up your banners. Whatever you need to say, you should be able to say it. Your input is very important. And while we're not discussing the issue that you were told we were going to discuss, just come inside anyway. Would you believe that 10 minutes after Senator Gutherz adjourned her hearing, you had one of those medical professionals calling talk radio saying that I chased all the manuncle away? Madam Speaker, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. And so I called in right away to clarify and to say that again is not about the truth. And so while it's unfortunate that we have to go through these kinds of instances, I'm never going to be silenced, no matter how rough it gets, no matter how tough it gets. But all I continue to ask is that people be honest about what they're saying, that I said, that any one of us said, that they be truthful about what the real issues are about, and that they don't divide our community, Madam Speaker. Our community is rooted in faith. You know, every time I see this group, I always go up to them. I always show respect to them. But in return, I get a comment like, "What kind of Catholic are you? What kind of Christian are you?" Well, I'm the kind of Catholic and I'm the kind of Christian that doesn't judge because Jesus Christ doesn't judge. You know, and then I talk about my upbringing and my grandma and what she did for the church at Santa Barbara. Once a week, she'll prepare the meals for the priests, and I'd go deliver the food or count limosna or do things like after she irons their clothes, we bring it down, and my cousins and I, that's what we do, because that's what my grandmother has done to my dad and his brothers and sisters. And so all of that kind of exposure to, I mean, my upbringing and what it's like to be Catholic is very different from what I'm seeing from these very Catholics, Madam Speaker. And I just ask that it stop, and I just ask that we recognize that this bill is not about life or death. Even the whole pro-choice issue is not about life or death. And when we begin to ignite a certain segment of our community and take something that is rooted in the basis of providing information for these kinds of procedures and spark it into a debate that ensues the kind of passion and gets people riled up, and I think that's when we start doing a disservice to members of our community, even members of our own faith. And so I just rise to express an observation in this bill and to say that there was unintended consequences, and not to negotiate one outcome or the other, Madam Speaker, but as you can see, some people have chosen to make some members of this legislature a lightning rod for this issue and a poster child for this issue. And the fact that we were called into special session, and the fact that we are acting on this bill based on the committee report that was received just yesterday, it's showing that this legislature is responsive to whatever the issues are. And I just forewarn my colleagues, Madam Speaker, that the next issue is going to be coming out just as soon as we resolve of this issue, because it is that time of year and that time of season where some can capitalize on the politics of everything behind what should otherwise have been good policy. And so I thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill and the process. I thank all those that have come down to the public hearing room to observe all of us in session today. And I just ask that whatever the outcome of this bill, Madam Speaker, that we focus on the bill, we focus on the policy, and we stop focusing on the politics behind it. And I thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome, Senator Respicio. On the motion, there being none, then so Senator Rodriguez, would you like to close?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, it's been a very long journey to reach this day, Madam Speaker. And my actions as the chair of the committee who received this legislation is may have offended and may have been unpopular to some. And Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to speak directly to them and apologize. That if I had offended you because of my actions to report this committee report out, I apologize. However, just like others or most of us here in this hall, I am a man of faith as well. 2 years ago, just like everyone else, I was elected to serve all the people of Guam, not just a pro-life group, a pro-choice group, not just the young, not just the old. However, in this issue, Madam Speaker, and every issue that comes before me, I cannot separate my faith and my belief. And my faith is what dictated my actions in doing what it is that I did in reporting this out, because it was it is our duty and responsibility as committee chairs to ensure that regardless of the issue before us, regardless of the legislation before us, if we agree with it or not, we must ensure that it sees the day of light. This bill, Madam Speaker, was introduced by Governor Calvo. And I want to acknowledge and thank the governor for introducing this measure and for the efforts of this measure. And I can stand here today, Madam Speaker, and speak about why we're here today, because issues were raised on why we're here today and how it was done. However, I was taught, Madam Speaker, is when you face challenges, when you fall down, you get up, you don't look back, you don't look down, you just look forward and you keep walking forward and get to your destination. And that's what we need to do. You know, I thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership. I thank our colleagues here for allowing this bill to go through the legislative process and to go as far as it is today, Madam Speaker. I also want to thank our people who came, who are here in the public hearing room. These are the steadfast, resilient people who never stopped. It wasn't just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, but these people have been really focused and have been persistent in what it is they feel strongly about and what it is they feel that we as their elected representatives must address. And that's what we did here today. And your leadership, Madam Speaker, to allow this to happen. I know that you and I discussed that once I reported this committee report out, we would have dealt with it in a session on November 13th. And you committed that it will be on top of the agenda. However, we're here today. And so we must deal with it today. It is my hope and prayer, Madam Speaker, that with the successful passage of Bill 52 as substituted, that really our community can begin the process of healing. There's been a lot of hurt. We've seen it here from our colleagues who spoke. A lot of pain in the community, Madam Speaker. Our island is too special of a place to allow this division and the ruined relationships to continue to go on. I want to take this opportunity, Madam Speaker, to reach out to the proponents of this effort, my fellow proponents, people that are here in the public hearing room, people around the island, even to the youth, Madam Speaker, who you and I were present at the Youth Summit, the 2012 Youth Summit. Other members of the body were present, where 57 students of the various high schools came together and adopted a policy that requested the Guam Legislature, their elected leaders, to pursue this bill, Bill 52. And so it's, aside from, the other accomplishments of having this get this far, having this issue that's been lingering get this far, it's an accomplishment that we have responded to the calls of, we always say, these are the leaders of tomorrow. But we say, no, these are the leaders of today. And we showed that, we demonstrated that with us being able to tackle this issue today, Madam Speaker. But in reaching out to our people, to the proponents, I want to ask them to respectfully reach out to the people who oppose this measure, people who oppose this effort, and to work together in a respectable way, because we've seen what happened here, Madam Speaker, that the committee undertook the efforts to work with different individuals, different groups, and groups were able to make some concessions. that's the beauty of compromise, Madam Speaker. I want to reach out also to the governor, to the groups that who have you know, done this email campaign over the past few weeks, and you know, actually it's been going on for a very long time. I'm not saying to suppress them, but I'm asking to begin the healing. Let the hurt go away, and let us all forgive each other. That's how we should live our lives. And of course, I'm not going to tell anyone here, most especially not how to live their lives. I think I'm the youngest one in this room, but we need to, Madam Speaker, is be able to forgive each other and say, you know what, we're going to get up, we're going to look forward, and we're going to get to our destination. And that destination, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that our island remains a special place that it is. In closing, Madam Speaker, I know that there also have been groups, women particularly, who have said, who have taken attacks on me personally as well. And you know, I accept that. This is part of everyone else here. You don't just get attacked if you are against this measure, but you get attacks on both sides. There's always two sides to every issue. Bill 52, Madam Speaker, does not take away the woman's right to choose. It's not the first time we've heard that here today. We've heard others that said it here today as well in this hall. All it does is give them the information, useful information to help them make that decision. We do it, it's being done. Not just in this type of procedures, but in anything else we do. We always have guidelines. We always have information to help us make informed decisions. Even in this body, when any legislation, any legislation that comes before us, we always make sure we get the information that's needed to help us make that right decision. And so that's my message to those group that have said that this takes away their rights. And again, I apologize to them if they have felt offended, but that's not the intention, Madam Speaker. And we've heard it not just from me, but we've heard it from others in this hall. And so I want to ask our colleagues to, let's close this chapter. This has been going on for too long. People who have, are very passionate about this, who have wanted to see this initiative through, have waited too long. And I want to thank them again, my colleagues here, for allowing this to get as far it is today. And I want to ask them to please vote yes on Bill 52. Thank you, and Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker.
On the motion, you're welcome, Senator. On the motion to send Bill 52-31 CR to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. You have the floor, Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, having exhausted the only item on the second reading file, I then move that we proceed to the voting file and that we vote on Bill number 52-31 COR as substituted by the Committee on Health and Human Services, Economic Development, Senior Citizens, and Election Reform, and further substituted by Committee on Rules and referred back to committee by the Committee of the Whole, and further substituted by Committee on Health and Human Services, Economic Development, Senior Citizens, and Election Reform, and further amended on the floor. I move that we vote without engrossment.
On that motion without any objections, so ordered. Bill number 52-31, CR.
Bill number 52. No, it's on. Bill number 52-31 COR substituted by the Committee on Health and Human Services, Economic Development, Senior Citizens, and Election Reform, and further substituted by the Committee on Rules and referred back to the Committee by the Committee of the Whole, and further substituted by the Committee on Health and Human Services, Economic Development, Senior Citizens, and Election Reform. Introduced by the Committee on Rules, Federal, Foreign,
And further amendment.
oh, and amended on the floor. Introduced by the Committee on Rules, Federal, Foreign, and Micronesian Affairs, and Human Natural Resources by request of Imagalayan Guam in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam. An act to add a new section 3218.1 to Chapter 3, Article 2, Title 10 of the Guam Code annotated relative to women's informed consent for abortion, and to cite the act as the Women's Reproductive Health Information Act of 2012.
Roll call.
Senator Tom Atta? No. Senator Tony Atta? Yes. Senator Blas? Yes. Vice Speaker Cruz? Senator Dueñas? Senator Gutherts? Yes. Senator Mabini? Yes. Senator Muñoz Barnes? Senator Palacios? Senator Pangilinan? Senator Respicio? Senator Rodriguez? Senator Silva Tyron? Speaker Wanpat? Senator Yamashita?
Substitute Bill number 52-31 COR received 11 yea votes, 4 nay. Substitute Bill number 52-31 COR is duly passed by this body. Senator Respicio, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that we adjourn this fifth special session, Sinadai.
Hearing objections, so ordered.
Yeah.
Adjourned.